Welcome to Skytech-Lens. On November 3, 2025, the carefully maintained civility between Canada and the United States unraveled in a way few could have predicted. For decades, the two countries had prided themselves on a relationship defined by mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to resolving differences behind closed doors. That evening, Ottawa's National Gallery was transformed for a black-tie Canada-US Business Council gala, an event meant to celebrate cross-border cooperation and economic partnership. Over 200 influential figures from both nations gathered under the soaring glass ceilings, expecting an evening of goodwill, elegant speeches, and the reaffirmation of long-standing ties. Instead, the atmosphere shifted dramatically when U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, visibly agitated, launched into a furious tirade against Ontario's trade representative, David Patterson. His outburst, laced with profane language, echoed through the hall, catching everyone off guard. The spectacle left guests in stunned silence, shattering the event's refined atmosphere and exposing deep cracks in diplomatic protocol that had long been papered over. In the aftermath, Hoekstra's wife approached Patterson to offer a personal apology, a gesture that only underscored the severity and public nature of the breach. News of the incident spread rapidly, dominating headlines and quickly becoming a symbol of the deteriorating Canada-US relationship. The media seized on the story, fueling public debate and speculation about what had gone wrong. For years, both nations had managed their disagreements with a sense of decorum, always striving to present a united front to the world. But this confrontation signaled a dramatic shift in tone and approach. The norms of respectful engagement, once taken for granted, now seemed fragile, vulnerable to the pressures of political aggression and personal animosity. Diplomacy, once a delicate dance of words and gestures, was suddenly replaced by raw confrontation and public spectacle, leaving many to wonder if the old rules still applied. As the last guests filed out of the gallery, the fallout was unmistakable. The era of polite, predictable diplomacy had come to an abrupt and public end. The foundations of cross-border trust, painstakingly built over generations, now appeared more fragile than ever before, their stability called into question by a single explosive moment. The pressures of aggressive political agendas and rising public scrutiny had finally burst into the open, leaving both countries to grapple with the consequences. As Canada and the United States faced the dawn of a new, uncertain chapter in their relationship, the world watched closely, wondering what would come next for these two neighbors now divided by more than just a border. The spark for Hoekstra's outburst was Ontario's bold advertising campaign, launched in response to America First protectionism. The campaign used a 1987 Ronald Reagan quote championing free trade, directly challenging the Trump administration's tariffs. Ontario's $75 million investment ensured the ad reached millions of Americans, even airing during the World Series. The campaign's success infuriated the White House, which saw it as a provocative act undermining U.S. policy. Hoekstra, tasked with defending the administration, was particularly incensed by the use of Reagan's words. The ad's timing and visibility turned a regional dispute into a national embarrassment. For the U.S. Ontario's move was more than defense. It was a strategic ideological counterattack. The fallout was immediate and severe. The ad campaign's impact was swift. Within hours, it dominated headlines across both Canada and the United States, igniting a firestorm of debate among politicians, business leaders, and everyday citizens alike. President Trump responded with characteristic force, abruptly canceling ongoing trade talks and threatening to impose a sweeping 10% tariff on all Canadian goods entering the U.S. market. The threat sent shockwaves through the Canadian economy and rattled international investors. What began as a provincial strategy quickly escalated into a full-blown national crisis, thrusting Prime Minister Mark Carney's government into a precarious and highly visible position on the world stage. Cabinet ministers scrambled to respond, holding emergency meetings late into the night. Ontario Premier Doug Ford refused to back down, defending the campaign as absolutely essential for protecting Ontario's workers and industries. He argued that standing up to American pressure was a matter of principle and provincial pride. Ford publicly condemned Hoekstra's behavior, calling it unacceptable, and demanded a formal apology from U.S. officials. This rare show of unity linked provincial and federal interests, presenting a united Canadian front against mounting U.S. pressure. The decision to pull the controversial ad was seen as a reluctant concession to Washington, but by then, the damage to Canada-US relations had already been done. Canada's federal system was put to the test, as bold provincial action brought about serious national consequences and forced a reckoning over the balance of power. The entire country now faced the economic fallout of Washington's fury. Factories slowed production, markets tumbled, and business owners worried about the future. The incident exposed the real risks of confronting a unified, aggressive foreign power, and left Canadians questioning how far their leaders should go in the name of provincial autonomy. Canadians demanded accountability after Hoekstra's tirade, with Premier Ford leading calls for a direct apology. The incident sparked debate in Ottawa about issuing a formal diplomatic rebuke, a démarche, to signal that such breaches wouldn't be tolerated. Experts warned that silence could be seen as weakness, risking further undiplomatic actions. A démarche would defend Canada's dignity and reaffirm expectations of diplomatic conduct. The public's demand for respect reflected a national identity rooted in civility and order. The Hoekstra affair was seen as importing a confrontational style onto Canadian soil. The call for a firm response was about more than protocol. It was about national self-respect. Canada made clear mutual respect is non-negotiable in its closest alliance. Prime Minister Carney's government adopted a strategy of quiet firmness, defending Canadian dignity without escalating the conflict. Ottawa chose measured private responses over public outrage, aiming to de-escalate while holding the U.S. accountable. This approach relied on process and protocol, presenting Canada as the mature, stable partner. With the 2026 USMCA review looming, Ottawa couldn't risk a total breakdown in relations. The government's restraint was a pragmatic calculation, balancing principle with economic necessity. By refusing to engage in tit-for-tat insults, Canada preserved its leverage for future negotiations. The contrast with Washington's confrontational style was stark. Quiet firmness became Canada's tool for defending its interests. The long game was clear: protect trade, preserve dignity, and avoid needless escalation. The Ottawa gala wasn't Hoekstra's first controversy, it was part of a pattern. As U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, he made false claims about no-go zones, later apologizing after public backlash. In Canada, Hoekstra's abrasive tone and inflammatory remarks, like calling Canadians mean and nasty, deepened tensions. His appointment reflected the Trump administration's preference for loyalists over career diplomats. Hoekstra's style prioritized political ideology over relationship building, often playing to Washington rather than Ottawa. The National Gallery outburst was no isolated lapse, but the culmination of a combative approach. For Canada, hosting such a representative signaled a troubling shift in the bilateral relationship. Diplomatic posts became battlegrounds for partisan agendas. The world's most integrated partnership now faced a new adversarial reality. The Hoekstra incident was a symptom of a deeper issue: the Trump administration's aggressive protectionism. Since 2025, the White House has imposed sweeping tariffs on Canadian goods, destabilizing the economic relationship. The upcoming 2026 USMCA review gives the U.S. leverage to demand new concessions, threatening the agreement's future. Diplomatic tensions risk being used as pretext for a harder line in negotiations. Canadian officials must defend national interests while managing a now hostile relationship. The old assumption of shared values tempering U.S. policy has vanished. Canada must now prepare for a ruthless, self-interested neighbor. The crisis has forced a reckoning and a push for greater economic independence. In recent years, growing U.S. hostility has dramatically accelerated Canada's push for economic diversification, forcing policymakers to rethink long-standing trade relationships and economic dependencies. The Canadian government is now forging new partnerships across Asia, Africa, and Europe, actively seeking to reduce its reliance on the American market and open doors to fresh opportunities for Canadian businesses and workers. Recent trade deals with South Korea, ASEAN, and the European Union are designed to secure stable, long-term markets for Canadian resources, technology, and expertise, ensuring that Canada's economy remains resilient in a rapidly changing world. Nova Scotia's dramatic policy shift, lifting bans on fracking and uranium mining, signals a renewed focus on resource sovereignty, as provinces look to harness their own natural wealth and reduce vulnerability to external pressures. The rush for critical minerals, especially lithium, is now central to Canada's strategy for the green energy transition, positioning the country as a key supplier in the global shift towards sustainable technologies and clean energy solutions. Provincial governments are taking bold, sometimes controversial steps to secure economic autonomy, sparking heated debates and public protests as they balance environmental concerns with the promise of economic growth and independence. Canada's determined approach underscores a new national resolve, one that seeks to control its own destiny, foster innovation, and ensure prosperity without being subject to the unpredictable whims of its southern neighbor. The diversification strategy is no longer just an option. It has become a national imperative, uniting leaders and citizens in a shared vision for the future. As Canada invests in innovation, new industries, and global partnerships, it is building a future that stands confidently beyond America's shadow. The National Gallery confrontation marked a psychological turning point for Canada-US relations. The assumption of automatic friendship has been shattered. Respect must now be earned and, if needed, demanded. Canada's strategy of quiet firmness reflects this new reality, balancing pragmatism with national dignity. Strength is shown through restraint, not reciprocal aggression. The push for new partnerships and resource independence is now essential, not optional. Canada's response offers a model of civility and confidence in a world of eroding diplomatic norms. The lesson balanced respect with self-respect, partnership with independence. The era of taking the US for granted is over. Canada must actively manage and defend its relationship with its powerful neighbor. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel for more updates.